Yo, what's going on, Stadium? Red corner, blue corner, killing it as always. But now it's time to talk about a real football conference, Mike. One that we actually watch week in and week out. Not just the weekend that two of the big three finally square off with one another. Of course, we could only be talking about the SEC. I am T-Bob Hebert, former LSU Tiger. He is SEC Mike, the host of the highest rated SEC podcast, all your podcast platforms. And we got a great show for you planned today. Mike, what's going on, man? How are we feeling today?
Oh man, the weather it feels like fall football, feels like upsets going to be happening this weekend in the SEC. I couldn't be happier, T-Bob.
Yeah, to give you an idea of how SEC I am, it got to 50 degrees and I immediately busted out my heaviest winter coat. Didn't even matter that later in the day it gets all the way up to 75. I'll be damned if you're going to stop me from getting these North Face fits off at 7:30 in the morning, okay? We got to get it where we can down here. Speaking of, I loved back in my day to get it in the trenches. And, well, the Joe Moore Award is the award handed out to the best offensive line in the entire country. And 6 SEC teams found their way into kind of the semifinal, if you will. However, I think it's a bunch of pretenders, right? Florida, no. Georgia, lazy. That's actually been one of their biggest weaknesses this year. Mizzou's nice, but they're not great. Kentucky had the one game against Florida. Outside of that, the big blue wall's nowhere to be found. To me, the only ones that stand tall upon further scrutiny are LSU and Tennessee. And look, we all know what LSU's offense has done this year. They ranked top 10 in the country in 7 different categories. Number 2 in total offensive first downs. Number 2 in the country in third down conversion. Number 3 in scoring. 4 in like the list goes on and on. One of only 2 teams to be top 10 in both rushing and passing. But if there is a legitimate challenger in the SEC, it is your Tennessee Volunteers, Mike. This is a Tennessee team that doesn't throw well. They're not explosive, but they run the hell out of the ball and they stop opponents from creating havoc. 2 things that are going to be critical going into Tuscaloosa this weekend.
Yeah, no question, T-Bob. And the one game that they didn't have their full allotment was the Florida game. And hey, I'm a Tennessee grad, so I got to make excuses for this dreadful streak against Florida. But the center, Cooper Mays, was out. Gerald Mincey, the right tackle, was out. And there was a notable difference. So, again, I didn't think that they would run wild on A&M, which had the number 1 rush defense in the SEC last weekend. They went for 232 yards on them Aggies. That was critical to getting the win. And it could be this weekend in Tuscaloosa. The one team, T-Bob, you didn't mention there that everybody hyped up was Alabama and this offensive line. They wanted to go back to murder ball, they called it. Well, murder ball is allowed 31 sacks this season, T-Bob. That's 130th out of 133 teams in the country. This is a big edge in this football game for Tennessee, the defensive line versus Alabama's offensive line, and it could be the deciding factor.
Yeah, that's something I want to get into here in a bit, right? Because that is the main statistical difference between that. Like, that's the main edge that it looks like Tennessee has on paper here. Royal Payne says in the YouTube chat, youtube.com/watch stadium, I was trying to figure out how to justify a fire in the fireplace this weekend, but it's going to be 82. Yeah, hell yeah, Payne. You're obviously from the South as well. Welcome. Yeah, look, what I love about this is, and to your point, Alabama didn't even make this finalist list, right? But what I love is I think LSU and Tennessee are the best, and I think they're both going to have the chance to go into Tuscaloosa and prove it against what is the SEC's best front 7, led by Dallas Turner, who currently leads the SEC with 7 sacks. He's 3rd in TFLs with 9.5. Now, to be fair to our Vols, James Pierce Jr. is right behind him in both categories, an excellent rusher in his own right. But, Mike, when it comes to stopping Dallas Turner individually, who is going to be responsible for that job? Which matchup should fans be watching come Saturday?
Yeah, that would be left tackle John Campbell, the Miami transfer, who he made waves nationally. If you missed it in the opener against Virginia, he basically took a guy into the locker room right before halftime, blocked him about 30 yards out of bounds. But I guess that's legal nowadays. But John Campbell, Hey, it is what it is in the NIL era. It's free agency. Tennessee went in heavy because they needed a tackle to replace Darnell Wright. John Campbell versus Dallas Turner. That's going to be a critical matchup this weekend at Tuscaloosa.
This is an interesting spot for Tennessee here going into Tuscaloosa because at first I kind of hated it for Tennessee, right? Like I'm very impressed how they handled A&M, but that was in Neyland. Now you're going into T-Town. You're playing against an Alabama team that has confidence. You're playing against an Alabama team that has revenge on the mind. And you're now a Tennessee Volunteer team that is going to try to beat Alabama at their own game, going to try to out-physical them, run the ball, right? This isn't like last year where you had the very explosive and dynamic offense to take advantage. But it boils down to this, okay? Both teams are great, second and third in the SEC, at creating havoc, right? Your sacks and your tackles for loss. Like you mentioned earlier, Alabama is awful at preventing havoc. They're dead last, giving up 31 sacks. They're second to last, having allowed 50 TFLs. Tennessee's great. Great. They've only given up 9 sacks, only 23 TFLs, lead the SEC in both categories. So it looks like the Volunteers actually have a significant advantage in the trenches, like Texas did. When they went into Alabama, they came out with a 10-point win. The difference is Texas was explosive. And so here's what it boils down to, Mike, and this is what I will ask you. Can Tennessee's slight edge on the line, maybe more than slight, can their edge on the lines make up for the edge that Alabama has in explosivity? Because if there's one thing that Jalen Milroe does, it's just hit home runs. He's like a classic modern MLB player where it's either strikeout or home run with him.
Right. And I think that's a big question. That is the question, because we've not seen it from not only from Joe Milton, but anytime he does hit one of these guys in stride, which is rare, they seem to drop the ball this year. So it's a failure by all accounts. And I would force Joe Milton to dink and dunk all the way down the field because he's not accurate. He's making critical mistakes. But one thing to monitor here, T-Bob, there was rumors that Jalen Milroe was injured about 2 weeks ago, and he's played, but he's not run the ball, which maybe that, and the injury rumor was hamstring. So maybe he's a little bit banged up, and maybe that limits outside of the shot put plays. That's a critical part of his game as well, running the football. And if he can't do that, I think that certainly favors Tennessee as well.
So here's something else that stands out in my mind when it comes to this game. You said you had a fun fact for me. Well, shout out to my guy Colin Wilson of the Action Network, Big Bets on Campus podcast. I love talking to him. He's a big analytical guy. And he gave me a stat that kind of blew my mind, right? You look at Jalen Milroe this year, and people think he's been all right. He's actually turned in quite a good passer rating considering the volume and everything he's been asked to do. But Jalen Milroe is actually carrying a 125 NFL passer rating, not that college efficiency rating that gets up into the 200s. He's carrying an NFL passer rating of 125 when pressured this season. And so when I look at that, and I think about the fact that, look, Alabama's going to get those explosives. Maybe that edge for Tennessee on the line start to not matter as much. I don't know where I fall in a gambling context necessarily, beyond that I love the under in this game, Mike. But unfortunately, from where I sit, after deep rumination, I do think that Alabama actually emerges with the win here.
Yeah, which Jalen Milroe shows up. I mean, he proved a lot against A&M, and that probably goes to Colin's stats there. I mean, he was getting harassed the entire game, yet if he wasn't getting sacked, he was making strikes to Jermaine Burton. If he can continue that, I agree with you 100%. I don't think there's any doubt Alabama wins this game, but last week against Arkansas, that was not there. I believe he finished the game 3 for 11 passing. So which Jalen Milroe shows up is going to be huge in this ball game.
Baseball Man 1019, T-Bob Mike, 2 pros, SEC legends. Thank you, Baseball Man. I'm Football Man. Nolan Hawley, got to hit that Tennessee money line. Look, my heart is always against Alabama, okay? I want the Crimson Emperor to lose, but he does cast a very long shadow, especially in T-Town. All right, coming up next, look, we all know that Georgia still reigns supreme atop the SEC, yada, yada, yada. They don't play every game's at home, but some of the rest of the conference, who is the best of the rest. You got a grouping of one-loss teams that are right there. And Billy Napier, old Sunbelt Billy. Is he catching too much heat in Gainesville? We'll tackle it next on Rivals. What's happening, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. Royal Pain. Milroe hasn't made a turnover since the Ole Miss pick. A good chunk of the sacks are Milroe holding the ball too long. He's 14th in the SEC and holding the ball time per play. That is fair. One of the things about Jalen Milroe, he's always been looking for that home run. But again, he kind of pulls it off, or at least has at times this season more often than not. I can't wait for the battle in T-Town. We'll continue to break it down. But right now, I want to talk about the one-loss teams in the Southeastern Conference because you got 4 of them, and I think it's actually a pretty eclectic bunch, right? There's the question of who is best. I think that's pretty clear. I think it's most likely Alabama, but I do think that each one-loss team is bringing something different to bear, and I want to start with the Missouri Tigers because to me, this is the feel-good story of the SEC. Eli Drinkwitz's probably my first half of the season SEC Coach of the Year, and it's been a turnaround that has taken place within the year. Mike, Brady Cook was being booed this season, from booed to beloved, in just a matter of a couple of weeks, and I kind of look, if things go their way, they finish 3-2 down the stretch, like they could have a 9-3 regular season. That would be a masterclass in Como, and I got to credit Drink here. Eli Drinkwitz, because he got extended. Everybody clowned him. He went and hired someone. He gave up play calling duties. These are not things Herbie Moore, Kellen Moore's little brother Herbie, but these are not things that head coaches who are control freaks normally want to do. And it has worked out quite well. And what do you think about this, man? I think about this a lot. In the NIL era, geographical recruiting means less and less, right? If you have economic buy-in. Mizzou cares. Like, that's what we got to understand. They don't have a pro football team. I love the Battlehawks, but they don't have a pro football team anymore. Okay. They got a big city. They care. And if like the best way to get people to invest is by outperforming expectations and winning, they could launch potentially into that SEC race, like top of going forward, even with a Georgia and a Tennessee, in my opinion.
Right. And you can't forget this was the team, at least in the regular season, gave Georgia their biggest test last season. I mean, they probably should
Yep.
have won that football game. Just look last week going on the road. Brady Cook, he wasn't awful, but he probably had his worst game of the season. Luther Burden was essentially a non-factor. I believe he had 34 yards receiving. Cody Schrader, who's second leading rusher in the SEC, was banged up. All those guys had subpar days, and yet they win by 17 on the road in the SEC. I mean, this is a team that's coming together, coming into and they've got an elite kicker. I mean, that could matter in these big games as well. So, yeah, there's a lot to like about Mizzou. I just hope that Drake doesn't make a poor coaching decision at the end of the game, like he did against Kansas State, nearly bit him. And I think it kind of did there at LSU, going for it on fourth and 38.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of a comedy of errors at that point. I don't know if they have a lead kicker; they have a thicker kicker, and he did hit that 60-yarder. So credit to him. But I think Mizzou's been delightful this year, and they ain't done yet. Like they're gonna be one of the more exciting teams to watch here down the second half. And then we arrive at Lane Whiffen Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels, Rebel Black Bears. I'm not entirely sure now. But look, it's been a pretty good year for Ole Miss. They have the uber disappointment in Alabama. They come back, they immediately get their signature win, a classic duel in which they go down 9 late in the fourth. Looks like, classic Ole Miss. They're going to blow it. They come back, they find a way to win. It's a great salve for any fan base's pain. Unfortunately, Mike, I remain unconvinced on this Ole Miss team, and it's all about that offensive line. Remember the big breakout game Quinshon Judkins finally had against LSU? 33 carries, 177 yards, over 5 yards carry. Well, what do you do next week? 18 for 65, 3.6 per carry. I mean, right back to what he had been the rest of the season. It's not his fault. I think it's that Ole Miss O-line, so I don't think they're good. And I think that Auburn defense in Jordan-Hare this weekend is going to give them everything they want and then some.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, T-Bob, but I think that LSU game had more to do with LSU's defense than anything. So I'm right there with you. This is the team that I kind of have the least faith in. Maybe it's Kiffin. Maybe it's Jackson Dart, who, I've touted him as a good player, and I think he is, but it just seems like when the moment is brightest, he comes up a little short. So now, in fairness, they've been missing pieces all across offense, and they're slowly getting those guys back. So they can outscore just about anybody, but that offensive line's an issue. That defense is an issue. I'm out on Ole Miss.
More like Jackson Fart. Am I right, Mike? All right, Tennessee next. Look, I don't think Tennessee's the best, but I'm actually most impressed with Tennessee because I think even though Tennessee was great at running the ball last year, nobody really identified them as that being a part of them, right? And so I see a team that after last year is very easy to say, well, that's purely driven by the quarterback. It's going to be like high-flying pass dependent, explosive dependent. And yet I see a Tennessee team that is lining up to win 10 games, and they're doing it with great defense, physicality in the trenches. Like, to me, while that may be frustrating in the short term for Volunteer fans, it should make you feel better because Josh Heupel is starting to show you that no, I can sustain success through the amorphous changes that are a college football team, right? Where we get new faces all the time. These players are very ephemeral. They come and they go. It's about the coaches. Can they sustain the success? And I feel like Heupel's doing a very good job of telling you, yes, we can.
Well, yeah, let's lead with the good. You're right. Heupel, he's done a masterful job, done a 180 with this offense, with this entire team this football season. But I think this is all smoke and mirrors. I think this was Jimbo just being an awful coach. He's a loss away from getting fired. South Carolina, I think, is one of the worst teams in the SEC. So, I mean, that's who you've really beaten of any count. And I don't even think it's that impressive. So I think this is a team that could lose 2, 3, maybe even 4 games down the stretch.
Alabama Crimson Tide, the best one-loss team. I mean, look, it's they have the most talent, they have the best defense. Oh, and most importantly, they have Nick Saban. I'll say this: if Nick Saban wins the West, and if he would somehow win the SEC, this would probably be the best coaching job of his entire career.
I'll have to disagree with you because I call it the decaying dynasty for a reason, T-Bob, and they just keep squeaking out victory after victory. I'm not impressed. Yeah, they got a good defense. They always have a good defense here in Tuscaloosa, but that's about all they got. I think this is another team that could lose multiple games down the stretch here. I'm out on Alabama too, and I'm just probably going to keep doubting them all the way to their next national championship. I get it, but I'm 2 feet in this grave already, so I can't jump out.
I mean, you got it. You already bought the clown makeup. You might as well get full use out of it. What are we talking about? Now let's talk about the man with the worst nickname in the SEC, old son Billy Napier. As the question is, look, are we giving Napier too much crap? I mean, Florida's pretty good here, right? They've kind of outperformed in some ways. Not so fast. Look, I think Graham Mertz is kind of a good microcosm of Florida. The numbers look good. 76% completion, nearly 300 grain, 12 touchdowns, 2 picks. Wow, amazing, right? Well, then why, Mike, is Florida 11th in the conference, scoring just 29 points a game? And they're way closer to the bottom than they are to be middle of the pack or the top. And really, when I look at their schedule, yeah, they're 3-1 in the SEC, second in the East, but they've only really won one game I didn't expect them to. That was Tennessee. And with UGA, at LSU, at Mizzou, home against FSU still left on this schedule, I think we are primed for a Florida second half implosion.
Yeah, and their fans keep jumping on me because they're second in the East. Let's give them credit where credit's due. Right today, they are. Will they finish there? No. But I thought the expectations I didn't realize was second in the East in Gainesville. I thought championships were the standard. And when you're getting your doors blown off by Kentucky, and you got players out here saying we weren't ready. Utah, they clearly weren't ready, and they had 9 months to prepare for that football game. A Utah team starting a walk-on at quarterback. No, there's mishap after mishap. And T-Bob, just last week, I get it. We won the game. We're excited, but they were down multiple scores. End of the game, 4th and 11. They throw a pass that would have went for -3 yards. They break a tackle. They get the first. Great story. They won the game. But the story would have been Billy Napier called a play for -3 yards on 4th and 11 had that tackle been made, and they would have lost the football game. That's the fine line of fans being excited and fans wanting to run you out of the town. And I think a couple more losses, they're going to be back off kicking Sunbelt Billy right where the sun don't shine.
Yeah, and those losses are coming, Florida. So look, don't get mad at me and Mike when it happens, okay? Because like we're not being angry at you. We're just trying to be honest with you. All right, coming up next, the LSU Tigers playing host to one of the armed forces, Army, this weekend. And wait until you see how they are planning on honoring those young men who are planning to serve this country while also playing football. More on Rivals next. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. LSU preparing to welcome Army to Death Valley for the first time in history this weekend. And they're going to honor the cadets with some camo end zones. Look at that, Mike. You love to see it. Thank you to those who are planning to serve and sacrifice for this country. But guess what, Army? We owe you revenge for 1931 when you beat the Tigers 20-0. Okay? And you're going to learn this weekend. But the camp.
Yeah, speaking of that, T-Bob, I got some trivia for you. All right, so Army is one of 9 teams that LSU has never beaten. Can you name the other 8?
Oh gosh, Penn State,
No,
USC.
Well, yeah, you're right. UCLA.
UCLA. Okay. What are we thinking here? Maybe like a Minnesota.
We got Nebraska, Stanford, Maryland, SMU, Rutgers, and Cincinnati.
I dare Rutgers to walk up in here, dude. I dare Rutgers to walk up in here to Baton Rouge. I'll teach Greg Schiano a lesson personally. Go ahead and get SMU on the schedule. Right. That's Power 5 now.
How about
Stanford needs a home. Put them in the SEC.
All right, T-Bob, in 2004, LSU had the Remington Trophy winner, nation's top center. Who was that?
Bro, that's Ben Wilkerson. That's my dog, man. You ain't going to get me on that. That's one of my favorite players ever, dude.
All right, how about this? 2 SEC teams scored 50 points on LSU in 2008. Who are they?
Wait, I couldn't hear you. I have in my ear. We got to go. Rivals Down South. Be back with more tomorrow.